So background, you all know how Oracle are. Yeah, that's probably why you're at this session. They have a bit of a reputation, and obviously when Java came up as a thing that they were introducing changes on, it got everyone's attention. This is a really popular topic of discussion with customers at the moment. It's fair to say that there's a lot of myths out there. There's a lot of confusion, a lot of complexity. Hopefully, you know quite a bit of what I'm going to say today, and hopefully it just underlines what you already know. And hopefully I'll debunk some of the myths you may have as well. As with any Oracle licensing session, one, it's going to be pretty dry. I will try and make it as interesting as I can. There's only so many pictures you can put in this sort of session. And two, you're not going to walk away necessarily as an Oracle licensing expert from this. It should open up ideas and confirm certain ideas for you, but you might not necessarily come away with all the answers you might need. And that's what the questions in the chat tabs are for here. So I'll just go back to those just so I've got them in the background there. In Oracle's eyes, they're offering these license or subscription changes as a simplification to the way that Java is being released and managed. And by that, what they're talking about is the synchronization of OpenJDK releases every 6 months and the Oracle JDK. So they're basically bringing those in sync. So they're released every 6 months, and functionally they are the same. They have different badges, but they have the same functionality between them, and so it should be easier to move between the two distributions. Again, in keeping with the Oracle database and other technologies and other providers such as Microsoft, they're saying no more major releases for future releases. So the jump from Java 8 to Java 9 or Java 7 to Java 8 is probably a better example, is no longer going to be a major update. So the jump from 12 to 13 will be a much smaller 6-monthly update rather than something major. There's a question here, will we send the slides later? I'm more than happy to, yes, absolutely. Just to keep things interesting as well, despite the fact that Oracle is saying this is a simplification, they are changing the name again. In line with the database, again, it's going to be year and month type release numbers. So it will get confusing. Everyone obviously is familiar with Java 8, Java 11 or earlier. Now it's going to become a bit more complicated to understand what that really means, as to the release you're actually on. In order for Oracle to synchronize the two releases, they've had to remove some of the features which were previously commercially available and sold extra, and so they've had to sort of make those part of the core OpenJDK offering. And they're targeting major releases every 3 years. So version 8 will be a long-term support, LTS, 11 and 17 as well. In essence, and this is simplifying it a lot, they're charging for security patches and support. Now, you've always had to pay for support anyway, but you're getting access to patch any critical updates or any security holes that may be identified by Oracle as they go through the release of supporting Oracle. Interestingly for Oracle, they're also introducing this as a subscription. So it's a combined license and support element. So it is a subscription. It's not a classic Oracle license where you have a CapEx purchase of the license and a separate support element, which you have some, not much, some flexibility with. This is one lump. It's combined into one. It is a subscription. That has some advantages, which I'll cover a little bit later as well. What this all boils down to is there's a lot of exposure, whether you're an Oracle house or not, whether you've got Oracle applications or technology, everyone has Java pretty much. It's going to be in your estate somewhere. You're going to have to consider this whether you know it or not. And it introduces a lot of people who don't know about Oracle licensing into all the fun world of Oracle licensing, which again, we'll cover in a second. So this timeline kind of shows recent history, 2018 onwards, and it kind of shows what happens at the end of the different releases. You can see here as a long-term support release. April last year, they basically said, right, you can either move to other JDK installations, OpenJDK based ones, or you can start paying Oracle for the joy of having updates available. In the meantime, Java 9, Java 10 came along. They kind of came and went very quickly. Java 11 was released a similar sort of time, early last year. Oh, sorry. And again, you have the choice with what to do with those, whether you want to get support from Oracle and get the patches from Oracle, or whether you want to use a different JDK release for that. That diagram looks a bit better like this. Kind of shows the cycle of the 6-month cadence that I was talking about earlier. So you can see between 12 and 13 and 14, there's very short time frames. Once you get to the end of one of these non-LTS releases, that's it. There's no support. There's no updates. It's dead. These releases, these non-LTS releases, are intended for developers to get used to new features and to start implementing them so they can move enterprises from LTS to LTS. So version 8 to version 11, version 11 to version 17, for example. So I've also put the release number there, the sort of new naming method for that as well. So you can see version 11 is actually 18.9. I've not seen anyone refer to it in the new numbering mechanism yet, but that will inevitably happen and just make things more complicated. Key changes, as I've said, Java 8, as of April last year, need to have a subscription in place if you're going to download security updates. There is a particular clause which talks about dev test prototyping, which I'll come back to, but it's worth consideration. So this new type of license applies to Java 8 from last year and also Java 11. It doesn't apply to 9 or 10. It's Java 11 and any release of Java 11 and anything later than Java 11 onwards. So it does go back to Java 8. Just to be clear, support has always been something you've had to pay for from Oracle. If you wanted it for your Java applications, if you were having a problem with Java 7 back in the day, you would have had to pay Oracle support for the pleasure of that. Now, in reality, not many people bought Oracle Java SE Advanced or Suite type licenses. A few people did if they had a particular pain that they were suffering, but it didn't exactly fly off the shelves. So in reality, you probably don't have any of that in your estate. This is a common misconception. If you have existing Java deployments out there, Java 8, Java 7, anything earlier than that, then it remains as is. As long as you do nothing to it, as long as you don't release anything, any patches to it, then you're fine. They can't retrospectively change the terms and conditions that you agreed to when you downloaded these older versions. Like I say, though, if you then come along and get something which is from the end of last year and apply that to Java 8 estate, then you're going to be looking to get a subscription in place for that. I'll just have a quick pause and have a quick look at the questions here. Someone's mentioning about virtual server and Azure. We'll come back to that later. So I will pick that up and hopefully answer your question there. I've mentioned the Java naming changes. Let's not dwell on those. They're confusing enough as it is. So I mentioned a second ago about the legacy license agreement, which is available, the binary code license agreement. It's an old one. It's from the early 2000s, and therefore it was introduced by Sun. And it went through several iterations under Sun. It kind of became into its normalized form, which was in existence until last year. Back in 2006, the terms and conditions haven't changed significantly after that, really. And that was Java 4. There's two different parts to that license agreement. If you've ever sat down and really reviewed what it means, there's standard rights, which basically give you the rights, what you can do with that particular download of Oracle Java. There's a supplemental section which talks about commercial features. And if you use commercial features, then you need to get a license in place, and also distribution as well. So if you're doing anything like that, obviously, you should have read that anyway. You should fully understand what that part of the BCL means to you and your organization, especially if you're distributing it or embedding it in machines or software. So is it free as long as no commercial features are used? Possibly. I'll come back into this in a bit more detail in a second. This is kind of the crux of what everything kind of hangs on for most people. Assuming you're not using commercial features and you're not using MSI installer or some of the other extra cost options, this is the sort of part of the clause you need to look at. There's a bit of language which talks about general purpose desktop usage and for servers as well. And in particular, it talks about general computing functions under end user control, such as email, internet browsing, Office Suite productivity tools. So you've really got to understand what that means to your organization and whether deploying on a server or running an application would fall under that or not. I'm not going to answer that question for you. It's up to you to decide whether that applies fully to your estate and whether you're working within the terms of that. My take generally on it is that this was introduced in 2006 to stop people embedding Java in devices such as DVD players or kiosks or hardware where Java was installed. Android phone may be a good example. without paying Oracle a royalty for that. So that's kind of the ethos behind it, is generally the approach I take, but it depends on how legal people interpret that in your organization and how it affects your estate. I'll just pause. There's another question here. If you have a 121 patch pre-relicense, you're fine until you download a new Java. The change came in at 2.11 or 2.12, which was April 2019. So yes, 121 would be, if you like, subject to BCL. And if you're happy with the BCL, there's no cost until you apply the latest Java patch. So this is the agreement which is now in place for the later releases of Java 8 and Java 11. It's worth sitting down and having a proper read of this and getting a cup of coffee and a highlighter pen. There's some really interesting bits in there if you're into reading contracts, as people like me and Frederick are. There's terminology in here talking about developing, testing, prototyping, and demonstrating your application. And what it in effect says is if you're doing that, and if your download and use of Java is for that purpose and those purposes only, then there's no license or subscription fee to put in place for that. So obviously production or commercial or anything which is giving your business benefit, you're going to need to have a subscription in place for, and therefore you're going to pay Oracle. But dev, test, prototyping may be zero cost to you. So absolutely make sure you read that and you understand it and you understand how you apply it to your estate if you're going to use this to not pay for subscriptions for some of your estate. Definitely get legal involved if that's the decision you're going to make as well. Just before I move on, this reminds me of the WebLogic license agreement which is in place, and the one which allows you to develop until the point where you release an application into production, or you finish developing the application and it's released. The terminology here is different. It doesn't have such a clause in there. It doesn't say that once you deploy from dev test into production, then you need to pay for a subscription for all environments. It's as you see it on the screen. So in theory, dev test environments will continue to be at zero cost on that. Production, of course, you're going to pay for. Non-production, like I said, you need to check how that's going to work. And you should, for all of these, not just non-production, you should expect Oracle to monitor downloads. We know they're doing that already. We've seen people being pulled up for that as well. So the download section of Oracle's website will be monitored. And when you register and you use an email address, they will come back and sort of check on who's downloaded subscriptionable releases of Java. There's a quick question on this one. Would you say that OTN can be used for third-party consultants developing software for a customer? If you're happy with the bits in red there, then probably yes. It probably would be. We have seen a number of organizations who prevent access to the download pages, which is up to you. It's a bit extreme, but it may lock things down if your organization is not very good at managing people deploying things onto their desktops or their server estate. So it's worth considering. Audit. These are the particular clauses which are in both bits of text. So for the BCL, there's not much about audit in there. That bit that's highlighted there and the clauses around there are pretty much the extent of the rights that Oracle have under the BCL. So there's no explicit audit clause in the BCL, which is worth bearing in mind. The OTN license, the new one, for example, does have a specific term in there, and it's pretty minimal as to what it says. It's even more minimal than what's in the OLSA. It's pretty restricted. It doesn't even say you need to provide reasonable assistance to Oracle. It just says they can audit, and that's it. So there's no timeframes mentioned there, et cetera, et cetera. There's some potential fun that could be had with that one. But they do have the right to come in and audit, so you should be aware of that. So for those of you who are from an Oracle licensing background and understand how Oracle database or applications licensing works, it's a bit different. We're looking at certain releases here. It's not the case where you can deploy any version of it and not care. So you do need to take version into consideration here. So that's relevant. If you have other Oracle licensed products and supported products, it's probably worth adding, then these products also have sometimes a functional dependency on Java. Now, there's a very good MetaLink document, my Oracle support document out there, which outlines this in a bit more detail. But in essence, if you have a product which absolutely depends on Oracle Java, and it's an Oracle product we're talking about, then that should be covered as part of that license and that support agreement you have in place for that parent product, if you like. So eBusiness Suite, Forms and Reports, WebLogic are classic examples of that. It is clear, though, that that Java installation, which is part of that bigger product, is only for use with that product. So you can't use that Java Home for other applications, for example. And you can't also raise a call specifically for that Java installation. It will be part of the parent product again. Third-party or in-house apps. There's going to be some questions about that one. You need to go and have a look at what might be included and what the application vendor may say is included. Have a look at the terms and conditions that they provide to you. A lot of application vendors in the past have washed their hands with it and basically said, you provide Java, you go and install it, then come back once you've done that and install our product. Oh, and in brackets, that means you're liable for any license obligation for such a deployment of Java. So depending on your application provider, they could be really savvy about this and really clever and have clocked this change coming a long time ago and said, we know this is happening. We're going to start supporting OpenJDK, and you're going to have the option of which JRE to use in the future. Or they may completely be clueless about the whole thing and not really know what they're doing. So if you're going to depend on a third-party application vendor, make sure you get some proof from them. If they say, oh, Java's included and it's fine, make sure you get some proof from them contractually rather than in an email or a verbal conversation. Some vendors, like I say, are way better than others on that basis. I'll come back to questions in a second. Again, slightly different for those who are familiar with Oracle products. We're looking at desktops and servers. Generally, Oracle licensing people are interested in server deployments. Desktops are bits and bobs, Crystal Ball and other products, Discover a Desktop, for example. Here, obviously, Java is going to be proliferated across the desktop estate in most organizations, and so we're going to have to consider that as well. There is an interesting bit on the price list which talks about you having the right to run your Java application as a cloud service, but not make it available as a cloud service. I think what they're trying to get out there, it's not a particularly clear clause, but you should scrutinize it if this applies to you. You can't really provide sort of a hosting type service using Java for that. So that may be a concern to you if you're doing something fancy with Java and putting it out in the cloud and making it publicly available. Pause for 1 second. So let me have a quick look at the questions. Can Oracle as a contractual party terminate the BCL? No. Well, only if they can prove that you've breached the BCL, I would say to that one. So no, I don't think they've got any power to do that. I'd have to go back and have a look at the clauses in particular, but I'd be very surprised if they could. And Frederick, what if you've used Java commercial features? Well, yeah, Java commercial features in any version would require subscription in place. And of course, if you've been using that for a long time before the subscription came along, you should have a license from then anyway. A lot of people don't. So the approach is quite complicated. What we're talking about in effect is taking a large set of data, looking at your applications, in-house, third-party, and Oracle-provided applications, and they're going to have different responsibility owners for those people who you need to contact. That's then going to get filtered into any existing licenses you may have, and also looking at the BCL is part of this first box up here. You need to speak to your application provider. You're going to need to think about what you're doing for patching and support for your in-house applications. You're going to have to make sure that any JREs or JDKs or deployments related to an Oracle product are only being used for Oracle, that Oracle product. You're going to have to get a large list of server and desktop deployments, and you're going to have to look at mapping those servers and applications to understand the relationship between each Java installation and the application. It gets really, really messy. or it can do, if you don't have good estate management. What you want to do, in effect, is crunch all that together, categorize certain systems, combine it into one single view. If appropriate, take out your older versions of Java pre 2.1.1, and then sort of say, is this prod, dev test, what application is this Java installation for? And basically allocate each installation a status to say whether it's licensable or not, being very simplistic about it. So that can take a really, really long time to do. It's going to require you to talk to a lot of people in your organization and to talk to a lot of system owners, application providers, and application sysadmins to understand why Java is out there in your estate, what it's being used for, is it really needed, what are the alternatives, what coverage may be in there already from your existing application provider. And once you've got this refined list here, that's all well and good, you then need to go to the effort of applying Oracle's policies to it and calculating your license or subscription requirement. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with how Oracle licensing really works, this can be really, really complicated. So it does use the processor and the named user metrics, which on the face of it can be fairly trivial. In reality, they're not. The processor definition in particular has got some many gotchas, especially around VMware, which I'll cover a little bit on the next slide, I think. Once you've done all that and you've allocated licenses to desktop and to server and you've calculated, then you in effect have a bill of materials. So during this process, you will probably revise your estate. You'll have a look at it and say, well, do I really need Java here? What's the policy going to be for this in the future? Are we going to continue applying patches to it? What's going to happen to our estate as we move forward? Are we moving away from Oracle Java? Are we going to go somewhere else? So it can be quite a complex process, especially if you don't have a single view of your estate. Considerations. As I've said before, don't assume you are immune. Everyone has Java, it's everywhere. And initial sweeps of most people's estate reveals Java installations that weren't expected, ones which are going to be subject to having a subscription in place. So it's definitely worth regularly checking your estate and scanning your estate. This is a fairly favorite one. A lot of people don't realize that the MSI installer, which helps people deploy Java en masse across their estate, especially Windows estates, obviously, is actually and always has been an extra cost option. You've always needed a license for that. And quite often people just go, oh, didn't realize that. Yes, we have been using it. Oh dear. And they have to reevaluate their use of MSI installer fairly quickly. It may be that's the only alternative they have. Some people on the call may not be happy with this next bit, but tools only provide raw data. Of course, they can't categorize systems as production, non-production, and understand exactly what they're there for. They might be able to flag up the fact there's an Oracle application alongside it, perhaps, if it's a really good one, but it's not going to be able to apply a categorization to that to say that JRE is only going to be used for Oracle applications. What we generally recommend is that you exploit the current tools you have for your estate, and then you go through that process I just explained. Yes, it's not quick, but hopefully you'll get into swing of it fairly quickly and you understand exactly how it works, and then you can build a repeatable process on the back of that. What we've seen a lot of organizations do as a result of this and performing reviews with us is they've come up with policies. So some organizations have just said, we will patch all our desktops, end of. And that's it. So they say we have 3,000 desktops. They go out and buy 3,000 subscriptions. And they don't go to any more detail than that. They don't need to go and check their estate for the desktops and do a full appraisal of that necessarily. They can just go out and buy 3,000 subscriptions. What I should have said when I was talking about the diagram is you are going to have to apply your processing to the server list and to the desktop list. Most people have two separate sources for that information quite often. And so you're probably going to have to treat those separately, then conjoin them at some point. As I said, some application providers will support OpenJDK. OpenJDK is not necessarily a panacea. We'll come back to that in a second as well. Actually, buying subscriptions, I've mentioned before, it's a bit different. It's not a perpetual license. It means that once you stop having that subscription in place, you have to remove the software. It's not like an Oracle license where you can stop support in some cases and continue having that old crusty version on your estate and not do anything with it. The terms and conditions are quite clear that once you stop the subscription, you need to remove the software as well. But it does give you some flexibility. So the subscription model itself allows you to vary your quantities at the next renewal. So you can buy these subscriptions for terms of 1, 2, or 3 years. So if you've got a 1-year term, then at the end of that 1-year term, you can actually get less licenses. So if you had 3,000 for your desktop estate and you're moving away from it, you can get 1,000 next year. You're allowed to sort of change that. Again, bit of an alien concept to people who are used to Oracle licensing. The costs on the face of it don't look that offensive. However, of course, if you've got a large estate, they can add up really, really quickly. So there's got to be a balance here as to how much time and effort you spend scrutinizing your estate if it's really small. Some people just go out and just say, well, let's just go and get our desktop estate covered because we've got 100 desktops and that's it. It kind of just gets the issue off the table for now and they come back to it later. As I mentioned earlier, the usual Oracle policies apply. So the VMware policy, whereby Oracle have a policy that you should license all ESX hosts within your environment, regardless of cluster isolation or management by a single vCenter or node affinity or anything else you might do, which is common sense to limit workloads. Those are disregarded by Oracle, and in effect, they say every single ESX host needs to be licensed. So that, to be clear, and I'm not going to discuss that here in any detail, I'm sure Frederick will touch on it as well. That is a non-contractual policy, but you need to be fully aware of what it means to you and how you apply it, what it really means to your estate. Unlike database and web logic type of workloads where people logically group them into clusters and you know, it may be possible to isolate them fairly easily in some other way, Java, of course, doesn't generally get grouped together. People just deploy it across their estate and across their Wintel estate without consideration of any sort of grouping. So any notion of grouping logically that may be in your estate for desktop, for database, etc., doesn't apply here because Java is going to be across your whole estate. Challenges. Tools can't fix this. It's always going to require declarative input. It's always going to require people to look at the data and categorize things and to group them and to sort of make decisions as to what the policy is and what you want to do with them in the future. We see the term embedded Java bandied around a huge amount. Take extreme care with it. Like I say, go and speak to your application vendors, see something in writing, understand what that means, understand what the obligation is to you as the end user and the licensee. Trying to get people to agree ownership for Java is really, really hard in some organizations. A lot of people say, well, it's desktop's problem, not mine. Or the server people say it's the applications team, not my problem. So getting one person with responsibility for Java is a challenge. It's not like where you have an Oracle database team and you go to them and they look after it and take full responsibility for it. You're going to have a challenge to get the right people engaged in this process, and that could be hard in some organizations. There is something really helpful called the Java usage tool, which is really good for finding out why a particular distribution of Java has been deployed. It tells you the application and the calls that have been made to the Java libraries. However, that in itself is part of the subscription. You need a subscription to use that tool to tell you whether what's using it. So you can't actually use that tool without buying the subscription. So what's the point of actually using it? We are seeing Oracle sending out some interesting emails, sort of doom and gloom type emails to organizations. It seems to be a pretty scattergun approach at the moment. They're sending them to anyone and everyone they can to basically scare people into reviewing this and to sort of obviously lead them down the path of buying licenses. So take those emails with a pinch of salt, do your own assessment, of course. We've not seen any formal audits come. We've seen reviews and requests for inventory be notified from Oracle, but we've not seen any formal audits be instigated yet. We expect that they will become more formal over the next few months, towards the end of this year, perhaps. And this is just a guess. Oracle will expect people to submit full data across all versions. For that, we expect, of course, given the terms of the BCL, do you have to? Probably not. Alternatives, OpenJDK is always the one that's bandied around. Like I say, it's not a panacea. It's an open source piece of software, so you can use it without cost. However, if you want to have security patches, you either have to go and build your own from source code, and that's not everyone's cup of tea, or you pay a provider for it. So Azul is a popular one that's bandied around. You can also get it from IBM, Red Hat, SAP, or the bigger vendors who truly bundle Java with their distributions, SAP being a good example. That's their own distribution of Java. They are going to build the support updates and the patches for those. You should stick with them. The other ones like Azul, etc., or Red Hat, you're going to pay for in some way, whether it's through the subscription for the Red Hat license or through a subscription with Azul. So they all have their pros and cons with regards to how you use it in your estate. There's also an unknown element about these organizations as well. How long will Azul be around for? Hopefully a long time, but you don't know. They're a they're not that new a company, but they're unproven, and their workload must have gone up massively over the last year or so. And that's not particular to Azul, of course. I just picked it out as not IBM or Red Hat. Some people we are seeing going to a mixed estate, so they are keeping Oracle Java and moving to OpenJDK, and the poll results kind of supported that to some degree as well. That's okay, but again, you're going to have separate appraisals and separate reviews of your estate to see what that actually means, and to who are you going to pay subscriptions to. And of course, there is always effort. So speaking to our Java guys, they've said, in principle, fine, move to OpenJDK. In reality, a lot of back testing, a lot of issues of porting things across, especially with the older versions of Java 8 as well. So it might be more appropriate if you're moving to Java 11, but taking it back to your older versions may be more of a challenge. So some case studies as to what we've seen here, just a few examples. Telco, top left there, we see them, a very large household name, purchasing on a project by project basis. And in particular, they said, we can't control this. No one wants to own up for it. We have no strategy yet. So let's just do it as we need it. Obviously, we've told them that there's risks to doing that. Retail, we've seen someone being approached by Oracle in that case, and before they contacted us, they sent a full inventory to Oracle. They, in the end, probably purchased too much from what they actually needed, and they entered into a 3-year term. So they're kind of hooked on that quantity for a long time now. Pharmaceutical company here, in effect, went through a full review. They bought a desktop-wide subscription. So like I say, 3,000 desktops, for example. They left the service for now without subscriptions. They are coming with a policy of what to do for that. A large negotiation was happening at a bank that we saw, and they basically said, look, Oracle, we're spending tens of millions of dollars with you here. Can you just sort this Java issue out for us? Because it's really, really painful, and we just don't want to deal with it. We're too focused on this really big deal we're doing with you, so can you sort that out? And interestingly, Oracle said no. They just said, no ULA, no enterprise-wide type agreement. We're not going to give you very much discount at all. You're going to have to pay for it because we know you need it. What are you going to do about it? And the bank had to go with that in the end. That was their choice. They said, we're just going to pay for it. And they covered their whole VMware environment as well on that basis. So they ended up paying a huge amount for the subscriptions in that case. So ULAs is something which up until now has been something not offered by Oracle in our experience. We are hearing some noise within the last week or so where they're starting to sort of warm up to the idea. Seemingly, we've not seen any details or how it would work contractually or what the metrics would be, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not sure on how that would work at this time. So summary, and then I'll come back. I've neglected all these questions, so I apologize. What we say to people is don't panic, take your time, don't respond to Oracle this time. Just take a moment to actually get a grip of your estate, do some of your own analysis, look across your estate, see what's out there, see what the risk may currently be, understand the rules, work out your policies by estate type and server type and deployment type, work out how you're going to count it, make sure you count those properly according to Oracle's policies, understand the VMware policy properly, and what it means to you. What we're also suggesting to people is, if they know they have a requirement for something, buy it now. And that at least gets them towards the bottom of the list, rather than people who've bought nothing. At least there's something in place and may not be on the radar for Oracle quite as soon as they otherwise would be. And of course, we have to say, seek help as well, whether that's to perform the review or to come and QA your results. Organizations like mine and Frederick's exist to do this for people. And, you know, it's if you've done all the work and you want it QAing